The diplomats have been under intense pressure during the Brexit process. Its civil servants are at the forefront of diplomatic efforts to ensure a smooth departure from the EU and maintain Britain's standing in the world. But some Brexiteers have accused its mandarins of being at the heart of the Remainer establishment, trying to thwart the Brexit that 17.4 million people voted for in 2016. The former Permanent Secretary Simon Fraser has made his views clear.
We have looked long and hard at Brexit and discovered it doesn't work, in any form.
Another night at the diplomatic service, Sir Ivan Rogers, the UK's former ambassador to the EU, maintains that Mrs May did not properly understand the EU when she triggered Article 50 and followed a negotiation strategy that was doomed to failure. He believes that diplomats have done their best to implement her red lines. The man charged with that responsibility was Ollie Robbins, a bête noire of hard Brexiteers who claim he never believed in the project. He was overheard in a bar saying Mrs May would never go for no deal, so the choice for MPs was her deal or a long extension. Well, we're joined now by Julian Jessop, an economist who once worked at the Treasury and also at the free market think tank, the Institute of Economic Affairs. Julian Jessop, who do you blame for Brexit becoming the shambles that it is?
Well, I primarily blame number 10. I think if we'd started from a different position a few years ago, if we'd openly said that what we want is a free trade deal and prepared seriously at the same time for a no-deal Brexit, I think we'd be in a much stronger position than we are now. Instead, at every single point, we've blinked before the EU. The EU has pretty much run the process. We've ended up in a very unsatisfactory position, and for that I blame number 10. I think a number of free market and pro-Brexit think tanks, if you like, have proposed solutions to the current impasse. If you look back to what people voted for, I think it's pretty clear they voted to leave the single market and the customs union and to come to some sort of comprehensive free trade agreement similar to, but better than what Canada. Well, even though people weren't using terms like single market and customs union, they were talking about regaining control of borders, of laws, of money. And those things, I think, are inconsistent with remaining in the single market and the customs union. If we'd started a year or two ago from that negotiating position, I think we'd be in a much better place now. And in particular, we could have said right from the outset that we were willing to leave without a deal. We could have put more investment into preparing for no deal. As it happens, I think we're probably prepared now as good as we ever could be. I think businesses might even appreciate the end of the uncertainty that leaving without a deal would at least produce.
Do you blame the Foreign Office?
No, I don't think the Foreign Office was leading on this. I think there are other people who may be in number 10 and the Cabinet Office, and indeed the Treasury, who possibly the finger should be pointed at. But I do think there seemed to have been an attitude right from the beginning that Brexit was an exercise in damage limitation rather than a positive chance to look at the opportunities that Brexit would create. And in the process, we ended up with something that I think pleases nobody.
You have set out that you think that the population should have been better prepared by the government, in a sense, and by the warring parties, if you like, given some kind of guide as to what this was all about. There are an enormous number of people who even now really know very, very little about what Brexit really means, and it's your fault.
Well, there are a lot of things that the government said in the run-up to the referendum that have turned out not to be true. For example, the Treasury was warning us that the level of GDP might be as much as 6% lower than it is now. So when people say that people didn't vote to be poorer, I think all the evidence is that they knew what the economic risks were. There's no doubt that the initial impact of the vote to leave has been negative for the economy. I don't think it needed to be anywhere near as negative as it has been. But in the longer run, once we've got through the transition phase, I'm pretty confident there are opportunities out there. There's still the opportunities that people anticipated when they voted, and those opportunities can still be seized.
Presumably you too would like an extension in the sense that you'd like to claw back the ground you've lost.
Well, if we are going to have an extension, I think a flexible one is a good idea. It's ridiculous at the moment we're going back every few weeks or even every few days to ask for an extra few weeks or months. My preference, though, would actually be to leave sooner rather than later with no deal if necessary. Now, I reluctantly come to that opinion because there's no doubt that in the short term it will be an economic shock we could do without.
What confidence would it give people if you sign a treaty long ago, but nevertheless you sign a treaty and you just breach it and go?
Well, we signed it, but we didn't fully ratify it, didn't go through the full parliamentary process.
Come on, you're splitting hairs.
Well, I don't know, because I think if people looking from the outside would recognise that here's a deal that Parliament can't approve. If we left without a deal, it would at least give us an opportunity to reboot the negotiations between the UK and the EU. Ideally, of course, with a new team negotiating it on our side. I think that'll be a better starting point. And it's where we end up that matter, not the process of leaving itself.